Seraphina Vance hated the night shift, a hatred that settled deep in her bones as surely as the fluorescent lights hummed above her. It was not the silence that bothered her, because she had learned long ago that silence could be comforting. It was the fact that the National Museum of Korea was never truly quiet. Even at midnight, when visitors were gone and Seoul's traffic softened into a distant murmur, the building breathed. Old stones sighed, wooden beams creaked, and history itself seemed to murmur in half-forgotten tongues. As she walked through the Silla Dynasty exhibit, her footsteps echoed softly against polished floors, each step measured and professional. She paused at each display case, checking humidity monitors and temperature gauges, her flashlight beam gliding over golden crowns and ceremonial swords. Around her, the air thickened with whispers that did not belong to the present. They slid into her ears like cold fingers, pleading and confused, voices frayed by centuries of longing. The whispers came in fragments, never forming a whole story, yet heavy with emotion. They spoke of loss, of separation, of pain frozen in time. Seraphina had learned to recognize them for what they were: ghosts bound to ancient objects by unfinished business or forgotten grief. She adjusted her noise-canceling headphones with a practiced motion, pressing them tighter against her ears as if that alone could keep the dead at bay. Ignore them, she told herself. Just ignore them. Eventually, she reached the door to the basement storage, the restricted section of the museum where only authorized staff were allowed. The air felt different here, heavier, as though it pressed down on her shoulders. Tonight was different for another reason as well. Earlier that evening, a new artifact had arrived, an obsidian box, sealed and unmarked, recovered from a construction site in Gyeongju. Even before she saw it, Seraphina felt it, a magnetic tug deep in her chest, subtle but insistent, like a compass needle snapping toward true north. She approached the box slowly, every instinct screaming caution. The closer she came, the colder the room grew, until the chill burned her lungs. Her breath emerged in pale white clouds, proof that something was very wrong. Her rational mind warned her to stop, to call for backup, to leave the box alone. But her body betrayed her. Her arm lifted, fingers trembling as if pulled by invisible strings, until her skin brushed the cold stone lid. The moment her fingers made contact, the world shattered. A violent shockwave exploded outward, throwing her backward as if she weighed nothing at all. The lights throughout the entire museum burst at once, glass popping and wires screaming, plunging everything into absolute darkness. For a heartbeat, there was nothing, no sound, no light, only the echo of her own racing pulse. Then, in the center of the room, a blue flame ignited. It did not flicker like ordinary fire. It burned with a steady, unnatural intensity, casting sharp shadows across the storage shelves. From within that flame, a man stepped forward as though emerging from another world. He wore a modern black trench coat over a tailored suit, yet his presence was ancient and crushing, as if time itself bent around him. He was tall, devastatingly handsome, and terrifying in a way that bypassed logic and went straight to instinct. His eyes swept the basement, confusion flickering across his face for a brief moment before they locked onto Seraphina. He did not walk toward her. The space between them vanished in an instant, a blur of motion that ended with him standing directly in front of her. His hand, cold as liquid nitrogen, closed around her throat, not to crush, but to hold her in place, pinning her with inhuman strength.
Who are you?
His voice was deep and resonant, vibrating through her bones as much as her ears. Seraphina gasped, her hands flying up to claw at his wrist, panic flooding her system. Let go. He stared at her, attention shifting to the point where his skin met hers. Surprise crossed his features, followed by something like disbelief.
You are warm. Why are you warm?
For 900 years, Kai had known only ice. Every human he had touched felt lifeless, cold as meat, left out in the snow. But this woman was different. Heat radiated from her, real and undeniable, like standing too close to a hearth fire after a long winter. Slowly, as if uncertain, he released her. Seraphina collapsed backward, scrambling away until her hands found her fallen flashlight. Her heart hammered as she aimed it at him with shaking fingers. "Stay back, I have pepper spray." Kai's gaze flicked to the small plastic canister in her hand, and a smirk curved his lips.
Pepper spray. Against a god?
He stepped closer, the air seeming to warp around him.
You woke me up. Why?
"I did not do anything. I just touched the box." Kai tilted his head slightly, studying her as if she were an unsolved riddle.
You touched the seal and you survived.
He leaned down until his face was inches from hers, his eyes shifting from dark brown to a glowing, predatory red.
Do you know what you are, little human?
Before she could answer, a shrill screech tore through the basement, vibrating off the walls. From the shadows, a black mist coalesced into a grotesque form, a guishon drawn by the surge of released power. Its mouth stretched unnaturally wide as it lunged straight for Seraphina. "Ah!" Kai did not even turn his head. He snapped his fingers once. Blue fire erupted from the floor with a thunderous force, engulfing the spirit in an instant. There was no ash, no residue, only empty air where the guishon had been. Seraphina stared at him, trembling so hard she could barely stay upright. Kai extended a hand toward her, his expression suddenly all business.
Get up. We are leaving.
"Leaving? Where?" Kai's smile was sharp and dangerous.
My house. Because now that you have broken the seal, every demon in Seoul knows you exist, and you smell delicious.
Kai's car was a phantom, not because it was fast, but because it seemed to exist slightly out of phase with the city around it. Seoul at 2 in the morning still breathed, with neon signs pulsing like tired hearts, delivery bikes hissing past puddles, and traffic lights continuing their lonely cycles. But the car ignored all of it. Red lights washed over the windshield and slid away without consequence. Intersections opened as if the city itself were holding its breath, allowing them through. Sarah felt the sensation of movement without interruption, a smooth, unreal glide that made her stomach tighten, as though gravity had decided to loosen its rules just for them. When the car finally slowed, the world seemed to snap back into focus. They were no longer surrounded by apartment towers or narrow streets, but by silence and space. The mansion before them rose like a contradiction made real, a structure of wealth and secrecy that refused to hide. Its walls were glass, vast, immaculate panes that reflected the moon and the surrounding trees. From the outside, it resembled a colossal greenhouse, a place meant to nurture life rather than house a man. Light glowed softly from within, filtered through leaves and mist, as if something ancient and alive were breathing inside. Stepping inside was like crossing into another climate. The air was warm and heavy with moisture, scented with earth, moss, and running water. Ancient trees erupted through the floorboards, their roots unapologetic, splitting polished wood as if it were soil. Vines draped from balconies, leaves brushing against glass walls where waterfalls cascaded in controlled vertical rivers. The sound of water echoed gently, a constant whisper that made the space feel less like a home and more like a cultivated wilderness, carefully restrained but never truly tamed.
Sit.
Kai's gesture was minimal, a single finger indicating a velvet sofa that looked absurdly soft against the surrounding jungle. The fabric was a deep, dark color that absorbed light and invited rest while hinting at luxury. Sarah moved toward it cautiously, every step measured. The room felt as though it were watching her with presence rather than eyes. When she sat, the sofa yielded immediately, swallowing her tension just enough to make her aware of how tightly she had been holding herself together. "Are you going to eat me?" Her fingers were locked around the strap of her bag, knuckles pale, as if it were the last anchor to a normal life she could recognize. The question carried a fragile attempt at humor, but beneath it lay real fear. The jungle walls, the impossible house, and the man who had driven through red lights, as though they did not apply to him, all felt like a prelude to a story she had never meant to enter. Kai moved with unhurried precision to a nearby table and poured himself a drink. The liquid should have sloshed and caught the light, but the moment his fingers closed around the glass, frost bloomed outward. Ice crawled over the surface in delicate patterns, sealing the drink in a clear, frozen shell. Pale mist curled into the warm air, an impossible contradiction that made Sarah's breath catch.
If I wanted to eat you, you would be dead. I have lived for 9 centuries. I do not eat children.
His tone was flat and almost bored, as if the idea barely deserved explanation. 9 centuries landed between them like a weight, stretching time until Sarah felt suddenly small. He did not posture or threaten, and the certainty in his voice was more unsettling than anger. "I'm 24. The protest was automatic, a reflexive defense of adulthood that sounded thinner the moment it left her mouth. In a room where trees broke through floors and water climbed walls, age felt like a flimsy concept with no real power.
A child.
He dismissed the correction without looking at her and lowered himself into the seat opposite with smooth control. When he finally met her eyes, the distance between them felt deliberate and calculated.
My name is Kim Kai. To the world, I am a venture capitalist. To the spirit realm, I am the gatekeeper.
The titles hung in the air, mundane and mythic pressed together. Venture capitalist conjured images of boardrooms and numbers, while gatekeeper suggested thresholds and things best left sealed. The way he spoke made it clear that neither identity was a lie. "I'm Sarah." Her voice dropped low, as though raising it might disturb the living walls. Saying her name felt intimate, like placing something fragile on an altar. "Why am I warm to you?" She had noticed it from the moment he took her arm outside, the way his touch burned gently instead of chilling her, and how her skin hummed in response. In a room full of cold miracles, her warmth felt like the strangest anomaly. Kai's expression softened as something heavy shifted behind his eyes. Deep, ancient sadness crossed his face, the kind that came from centuries of accumulation, making him look less like a predator and more like a relic worn thin by time.
Because of the curse, I was stabbed with a sword forged in the blood of 1,000 soldiers. It froze my heart. Only one person can warm it.
As he spoke, the jungle quieted and the waterfalls softened to a murmur. His words carried history rather than metaphor, turning a frozen heart into a condition and a prison. The Sunchild? Folklore surfaced instinctively, half-remembered stories whispered in childhood that blurred the line between warning and wish.
The bride, the one destined to pull the sword out.
The destiny he described did not sound triumphant. It sounded final, like the closing of a door locked for centuries. And then, what happens? She leaned forward without realizing it, drawn by the gravity of the answer and the sense that it would reshape the meaning of the room and of herself.
Then I become mortal, or I die, either as a gift.
The pause between his words stretched, filled with possibilities that felt terrifying and tender. Mortality and death carried the same weary hope. Kai leaned forward and closed the space between them, his attention narrowing until Sarah felt like the only solid thing left in the room.
Give me your hand.
Sarah hesitated, instincts warning her of thresholds and consequences. The look in his eyes unraveled her resistance, hungry yet reverent, and she extended her hand in a motion that felt irrevocable. Kai took her hand with surprising gentleness and released a long, uneven breath. Steam rose, where their skin met as frost retreated from his fingers, melting into droplets that slid along his skin. For the first time in hundreds of years, warmth claimed territory long denied, subtle but unmistakable, like dawn easing into a frozen landscape.
It feels like the first day of spring.
Sarah felt something awaken in herself, a tingling current that bloomed in her chest. Fear loosened and gave way to recognition so deep it felt pre-existing, less a beginning than a return.
But you know what? You have to stay here.
When he opened his eyes, the red glow was gone and replaced by a deep brown that felt startlingly human. The command in his voice was absolute, without cruelty.
If you leave, the spirits will hunt you down to get to me. You are my battery now, Sarah.
The word was modern and inelegant, yet terrifying in its clarity. Whatever warmth she carried was no longer hers alone. Your battery? She echoed it faintly, trying to understand what part of herself had been claimed.
My warmth, my tether.
He stood as the decision settled into fact. The jungle house seemed to accept it, leaves rustling softly while water continued its endless descent.
There is a guest room on the second floor. Do not go into the west wing. That is where I keep the things that bite.
Living with a demon king was not something that could be explained with simple words. Confusing was only the surface of it. The house itself seemed to respond to Kai's moods, with corridors colder when he was distant and warmer when he lingered nearby. Some days he vanished without warning, leaving behind a silence so heavy it pressed against Sarah's ears. Other days he followed her through the rooms like a living shadow, never touching or speaking, but always close enough that she could feel the steady, unnatural heat radiating from him, as if her presence anchored him to the world. Sarah tried to adapt by clinging to routine. She attended her online lectures, typed notes, and pretended that teleportation was just another odd roommate habit. Yet, every small normal act felt subtly distorted by the knowledge that the man sharing her space was ancient, powerful, and constantly restraining something vast and violent within himself. The tension hummed beneath the surface, unspoken but never absent. One quiet evening, when the sky outside had darkened into a calm, ordinary dusk, Kai was gone again. The house felt hollow without him, the air cooler and emptier. That was when the doorbell rang, sharp and sudden, slicing through the stillness and echoing longer than it should have, making Sarah's shoulders tense before she even moved. She checked the security monitor out of habit. A handsome young man stood at the door, dressed impeccably in a white suit far too formal for a residential delivery. His smile was easy and practiced, and nothing about him screamed danger, which was precisely why unease crawled up Sarah's spine as she pressed the intercom. Yes?
Delivery for Mr. Kim. It's urgent.
Against the quiet warning screaming in her instincts, Sarah opened the door. The moment the man crossed the threshold, the air thickened with a sharp, unfamiliar scent. His smile did not fade, but his pupils narrowed into elegant, predatory slits. She realized too late that this was no delivery. He stepped fully inside with ownership in every casual movement, as if the house already belonged to him. He inhaled deeply, savoring the space, and locked his gaze onto Sarah with unsettling hunger.
Ah, so this is the little heater.
Sarah retreated instinctively until her back brushed the cool wall. Fear tightened her chest, but she forced her voice steady as her heart pounded. Who are you?
An old friend of the general's. I'm a gumiho. Do you know what that is?
Juno advanced with deliberate, predatory steps, his casual words dripping with cruelty as the distance between them shrank. Sarah felt trapped and cornered by something ancient wearing a human smile.
Kai is hoarding you. It's selfish. He wants to die, but he won't let us have a bite of the power source first.
He lunged without warning, and time seemed to fracture. Instinct overrode fear as Sarah grabbed the nearest object and swung with all her strength, shattering a priceless vase against his head in an explosion of porcelain. The vase was destroyed in an instant, but Juno did not flinch. He wiped ceramic powder from his cheek, amused rather than injured, his grin widening.
Feisty, I like the spicy ones.
He seized her throat with terrifying ease and lifted her from the ground. Sarah clawed at his wrist and kicked uselessly as her lungs burned and dark spots crowded her vision. Inside her mind, her scream was raw and desperate, a plea flung into the void with everything she had left. She begged for help and called Kai's name. The answer came as violence. A thunderous crack split the air, shaking the house as glass walls exploded inward and a storm surged through the opening with an overwhelming presence. Kai emerged from the heart of the storm with no human mask concealing him. Blue fire wrapped around his form, alive and roaring, as power radiated from him in crushing waves.
Juno,
His voice thundered through the room, ancient and furious, and terror drained Juno's confidence at once. He dropped Sarah and stumbled back with wide eyes.
I was just visiting.
Kai lifted his hand, and the air screamed as a spectral sword of condensed blue energy formed. He swung without hesitation. Juno barely escaped by dissolving into smoke as the blade carved through empty air and shattered the remaining window.
Crazy bastard.
The storm receded as quickly as it had arrived. Kai turned back to Sarah, collapsed on the floor, and crossed the room in an instant, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands hovered over her bruised neck, trembling as if afraid to cause more harm.
Did he break you?
I'm okay. Rage and fear shattered what control he had left as Kai slammed his fist into the marble floor, cracks spiderwebbing outward.
You are not okay. I left for 1 hour. 1 hour.
His gaze fixed on the darkening bruise at her throat, and the fury drained away, leaving raw guilt and centuries of regret in his eyes.
I am a monster. Everything around me gets destroyed. I should have left you in the museum.
Sarah reached for him despite the pain and touched his cheek gently, seeing endless loneliness instead of a demon king. You came back. You saved me. Kai leaned into her touch and closed his eyes as if anchoring himself to her warmth.
I will always come back, even if I have to crawl out of hell.
Sleep abandoned Sarah long before dawn. It clung to the ceiling of her room like a mocking presence, heavy and unreachable, while her thoughts churned restlessly beneath it. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt that familiar pull, an invisible thread drawing her through the silent corridors of the estate. Finally, surrendering to it, she rose, wrapped in the hush of night, and let her bare feet carry her toward the West Wing, toward Kai. The West Wing did not feel like a forbidden place as she entered it. There was no sense of imprisonment, no echo of chains or rot. Instead, the air was reverent, almost sacred, as if the walls themselves remembered prayers whispered centuries ago. This was not a dungeon meant to confine a monster. It was a shrine built to remember a man, or perhaps to mourn what he had become. Paintings stretched along the walls, their surfaces dimly illuminated by moonlight filtering through high windows. Each portrait depicted the same woman, rendered again and again in meticulous devotion. She wore ancient Goryeo hanbok, the fabric flowing with a grace frozen in time. Her expression was serene, distant, untouched by the centuries that had crumbled outside these walls. Sarah studied the woman's face, searching for herself within it. The eyes were wrong. The shape of the mouth and the bearing of the body did not match. Understanding settled in her chest, sharp and quiet. She felt a pang of disappointment she had not known she was carrying. She was not a reincarnation reborn from legend. She was only a modern girl whose soul happened to resonate on the right frequency. Kai stood by the window with his back turned to her, the night wind brushing against his bare skin. Moonlight traced the lines of his shoulders and spine, carving him into something both vulnerable and impossibly ancient. When Sarah saw him, her breath caught, and a soft gasp escaped before she could stop it. From his chest protruded the hilt of a sword, rusted, ancient, and wrong. It did not exist to ordinary eyes, but to her spirit sight, it was devastatingly real. The skin around it bore scars that looked burned and torn, as though his body had rejected the weapon, yet could never expel it. The sight made her chest ache with a pain that was not her own. "Does it hurt?" Her voice trembled from the doorway, small against the vastness of the shrine. Kai turned slowly to face her, unashamed, making no effort to cover himself. His expression was calm, almost gentle, as if pain had long ago become an old companion rather than an enemy.
Only when I breathe.
The simplicity of his answer struck harder than any complaint could have. Sarah crossed the distance between them, step by careful step, as though moving too quickly might shatter him. She lifted her hand, fingers hovering inches from the phantom hilt, feeling a cold that did not belong to the room, but to him. "Can I touch it?" Her fingers trembled in the air, suspended between curiosity and fear. Kai watched her intently, his eyes dark with knowledge earned through centuries of suffering.
If you touch it, you might pull it out. And if you pull it out, I dissolve into dust.
The words echoed like a death sentence. Sarah withdrew her hand instantly, curling it back to her chest as though burned by the thought alone. Her fear was raw and unguarded. "I don't want you to die." Kai's gaze sharpened as he searched her face, as if trying to understand a language long forgotten.
Why? I am tired, Sarah. I have watched dynasties fall. I have buried wives, children, friends. I am an artifact that forgot to break.
The weight of centuries pressed down on the space between them. Sarah swallowed, her heart aching at the loneliness threaded through his words. "Because who will make me tea in the morning? Who will scare away the ghosts?" For a moment, silence held them. Then Kai smiled, a fragile and sorrowful curve of the lips that held both beauty and grief. It was the smile of someone who had almost forgotten how.
You are a strange woman. You see a monster and you ask for tea.
He reached for her and pulled her close. His skin was freezing, the cold seeping into her palms and arms. Yet where she touched him, warmth bloomed outward in a widening circle, as if her presence alone challenged the curse that bound him.
I don't want to die today, not yet.
He kissed her. It was nothing like a human kiss. It was like standing in the heart of a storm. Power surged through her, electric and biting with cold, threatening to overwhelm her senses. Yet Sarah did not pull away. She kissed him back, pouring her own warmth and her own life into him. Slowly, impossibly, the cold receded. Beneath her hand, something shifted. For the first time in 900 years, Kim Kai felt a heartbeat, not the cursed echo that had sustained him, but a real living rhythm answering hers. They came together on the floor of the shrine, surrounded by the painted faces of his past and the unseen ghosts of everything he had lost. History watched them in silence, but it held no power here. Tonight, only the present existed. Only shared breath, shared heat, and the fire they created together mattered. Juno was not finished. Not with the world, not with Kai, and certainly not with Sarah. The defeat he had suffered before had not ended him. It had sharpened him. In the shadows of old texts and forbidden lore, he had uncovered a loophole buried deep within the laws that governed immortals. The blood moon eclipse was not merely a celestial event. It was a ritual key, a rare convergence where the boundaries between life, death, and legend thinned to a fragile veil. During that eclipse, ancient rules could be rewritten. The knowledge was cruel in its simplicity. If a gumiho devoured the heart of a goblin's bride at the height of the blood moon, the goblin's immortality would not vanish. It would be stolen, absorbed, and claimed. Juno smiled when he learned this, a slow and venomous satisfaction curling through him. He no longer needed to destroy Kai outright. He only needed to take what Kai loved most. Kai felt the omen long before the sky began to change. Immortality came with instincts honed over centuries, and every one of them screamed that the end game was approaching. Panic, rare and corrosive, drove him to desperate measures. He tried to lock Sarah inside the reinforced panic room, a space warded with sigils meant to withstand supernatural assault. His hands shook as he activated the seals, already knowing it would not be enough. Sarah refused. She stood her ground, eyes blazing with a resolve that frightened him more than Juno ever could. "We can't hide forever. We have to end him.
How?
I have a plan, but you have to trust me." Trust. The word echoed through Kai as they made their way to Namsan Tower, the highest point in Seoul, rising like a solitary sentinel above the city. The air grew thinner as they ascended, heavy with anticipation and something darker, magic awakening in response to the coming eclipse. Below them, the city pulsed with ordinary life, unaware that its fate was about to be decided above its rooftops. As the eclipse began, the moon slowly surrendered its silver glow, staining itself a deep and violent red. The light washed over the tower like spilled blood. That was when Juno appeared, stepping out of a distortion in the air as if reality itself had parted for him. Around him came an army of lesser spirits, malformed and writhing. Shadow monsters clawed their way up the sides of the tower, defying gravity, their forms melting and reforming with every movement.
Give her to me, Kai, and I will let you die in peace.
Juno laughed, a sound threaded with madness and triumph. His 9 tails unfurled behind him, fully visible, swirling like dense black smoke shot through with flickers of crimson light. Each tail radiated ancient hunger. The blood moon illuminated him like a coronation. Kai stepped in front of Sarah without hesitation. Blue fire erupted from his core, summoned by will and instinct, roaring outward until it formed a blazing wall between them and Juno. The heat distorted the air, humming with restrained fury.
Over my dead body. That's the plan.
Juno attacked, and the night exploded into chaos. Fire and shadow collided above the city in a cataclysmic display, each impact sending shockwaves rippling through the clouds. From the streets below, humans would later speak of a freak lightning storm, of thunder without rain and light that burned the sky gold and blue. They would never know how close annihilation had come. Kai fought like a god unchained, blue flames tearing through shadows, but Juno had come prepared. The lesser spirits swarmed him in relentless waves, biting and tearing at his form. Their numbers overwhelmed even his immortal strength. Piece by piece, they dragged him down until he fell to one knee, blue blood splattering against the stone. "Kai." Her scream cut through the chaos. Juno did not waste the opportunity. He bypassed Kai entirely, slipping past the blue fire with predatory grace. In a heartbeat, he lunged for Sarah, his jaws parting and his eyes gleaming with anticipation.
Time to eat.
Sarah did not run. Fear trembled through her, but it did not control her. She stood her ground and reached beneath her shirt, her fingers closing around the amulet she had worn since the beginning. The red jade ring glowed as its dormant power awakened under the eclipse. "Kai, the sword. Use the sword."
I can't. If I pull it out, I die.
Blue blood streamed from his wounds as he shouted, the weight of centuries pressing down on him. The sword embedded within his chest was both his curse and his anchor. To remove it was to unravel everything that made him what he was. "You won't die, trust me." Juno was inches away, the stench of shadow suffocating. Kai looked at Sarah and saw not fear, but absolute faith. In that instant, he made a choice that no immortal ever should. He reached into his own chest and grasped the invisible hilt. Agony tore through him as he pulled. His scream echoed across the tower as if his very soul were being ripped free. The sound of tearing metal rang out, vibrating through stone and bone alike. When the sword emerged, it was no longer rusted. It blazed in his hand, transformed into a blade of pure, blinding sunlight. The curse shattered, and instead of fading, Kai swung. A wave of golden light erupted from the blade, sweeping across the tower in a single devastating arc. Juno was disintegrated mid-scream, his form unraveling into nothingness. The spirits vanished with him, erased as if they had never existed. For one impossible second, the night sky turned into day. Then there was silence. The sword slipped from Kai's hand and vanished before it touched the ground. His body collapsed, lifeless, onto the cold stone. Sarah ran to him, dropping to her knees and cradling his head in her lap as the red moon began to fade. Sao? Kai. He was not breathing. His skin lost its color, turning gray beneath her trembling hands. You promised you'd come back. She kissed him, pouring every ounce of her love, her spirit, and her warmth into him, clinging to him as if refusing to let death claim its due. Come back to me, please. Time stretched painfully. A minute passed, then another. The world seemed to hold its breath. A gasp tore through the silence. Kai's eyes opened, glowing gold. He inhaled deeply as life flooded back into him.
You tricked me.
I did a thesis on the Dokkaebi legends. The legend says if the bride pulls the sword with love, the goblin does not die. He becomes human. Kai lifted his hand, marveling at its warmth. He felt the cold wind on his skin. He felt his heart beating, fragile, finite, and alive. Mortality settled over him like a strange and beautiful weight.
I'm human. I'm weak. I'm hungry. I'm cold.
I'll warm you up.
You'd better, because I intend to live a very, very long life with you.
Snow drifted down over Insadong with a patient, unhurried grace, each flake spiraling as if reluctant to meet the ground. The narrow street outside the cafe softened beneath its white veil, footsteps muffled, neon signs blurred into watercolor halos. Inside, warmth gathered in pockets, steam from cups and breath held between words, creating a gentle refuge from winter's insistence. Time seemed to slow, stretching the moment thin and luminous. By the wide window sat a man and a woman, framed like a quiet painting. The glass held the cold at bay while offering the world in motion beyond it. Their table was small and intimate, marked by rings of heat from mugs and the faint scent of cocoa and coffee. Outside rushed a city full of stories. Inside, their story rested, unhurried, content to be exactly where it was. The man wore a thick sweater chosen for comfort rather than fashion, its sleeves slightly bunched at the wrists as he cradled his drink. Winter pressed against him anyway, needling through memories of a time when cold had not mattered. He shifted, shoulders rising as if bracing, a habitual complaint forming with the ease of a well-worn ritual.
The heating bill is going to be astronomical.
He grumbled and lifted the mug to his lips, the steam fogging his glasses and momentarily blinding him to everything but warmth. Across from him, the woman laughed, the sound light and unguarded, carrying a warmth no heater could replicate. She sat with easy confidence, one hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly in a protective, instinctive gesture. The future sat with them at the table, unspoken yet undeniably present, listening as closely as the falling snow. Stop whining, she teased him, her eyes bright with affection. You're the CEO of a conglomerate. You can afford heat. He smiled into his cup, the corners of his mouth betraying him, even as he tried to sound put upon. The cold was real, but it was also a reminder of loss, of change, and of humanity reclaimed. He set the mug down carefully, grounding himself in the present.
I liked it better when I didn't feel the cold.
He teased her, his eyes flicking up to meet hers. Liar. The word landed between them without weight, cushioned by years of shared truths and forgiven falsehoods.
True, I am a liar.
He reached across the table, unhurried and deliberate, savoring every inch of distance closing between them. His fingers wrapped around hers, and the warmth there was immediate and profound. It was not the blazing heat of power once held, but something steadier, earned through choice and time.
I wouldn't trade this for all the magic in the world.
Beyond the glass, unseen by most, a small spirit drifted along the street, translucent and uncertain, peering at signs it could no longer read. It hovered, lost, curiosity tugging it closer to the living warmth inside. Snow passed through it without resistance, a reminder of its in-between state. Sarah noticed immediately. Her eyes, attuned to more than the ordinary, caught the flicker of otherness. She offered the ghost a quick, playful wink, an acknowledgement without invitation. Beside her, Kai saw it too, the sight lingering like an echo even after the power had gone quiet. Kai's gaze hardened for a heartbeat as an old instinct surfaced. The thought was sharp and territorial, unspoken but potent, telling the spirit to go away. The ghost felt it like a sudden storm, recoiled, and fled down the street, vanishing into the snowfall with startled haste. Sarah's laughter followed, warm and amused, dissolving the last traces of menace. Once a demon king, always a demon king. Kai bowed his head and pressed a reverent, gentle kiss to her knuckles, as if sealing a vow renewed daily.
No,
He spoke softly.
just a husband, and that is the only title I ever wanted.
They turned back to the window together, watching the snow continue its quiet descent. Two mortals sat wrapped in warmth and memory, in a world still humming with magic just beyond reach. They asked nothing more of it. In the simple miracle of shared time, they lived their ordinary, extraordinary, happily ever after.